Hey, how's it going? I'm Patrick. I changed my little tagline there to AWS Fanboy because this is my fourth reInvent, and it was thoroughly enjoyable as always. I'll prepare you, I have 96 slides, so we're gonna run through these, but they're mostly pictures, so it'll be good. It's hopefully I'll spend maybe like 2 to 3 seconds per slide, so we'll be out of here in like 30 minutes. This is the AWS reInvent recap. This year we had, well, they had, I'll say we, they had 43,000 attendees. It's a lot, about 1,000 plus breakout sessions, and this is the first year that they were actually in multiple casinos. So normally they're just in the Sands Expo Hall over there by the Venetian and Palazzo. This year they decided to be in 6 locations. It was all over the place. It was pretty intense. So the first night was Tuesday Night Live, and it had Peter DeSantis, the VP of AWS Global Infrastructure. If you want to actually watch it, I highly recommend that you check out these YouTube videos, because it's my little bit of time that I spend on this is not going to be anything comparable to what you're actually going to hear. So they have now 11 regions launched in the first 10 years, and they've now had, or they plan on having, in the next 3 years, from 2016 to 2018, another additional 11 regions built. So you can see, all these ones that have been built already. There are all those different regions that are coming soon. It's just, they're building them all over the place. Over 100 points of presence at the various CloudFront locations, or the edge locations for Amazon. They are particularly in specific regions. They're just all over the place. And now they have 67 Direct Connect affiliates. So they're all over the place. That's what those 2 slides are just showing. So the next thing he talked about in the Tuesday Night Live was they're really all in on machine learning now. So Clemson actually was able to provision 1.2 million cores in 2 hours with all the NLP stuff that's going on now. So it's just the idea that you could provision 1.2 million cores in 2 hours is mind-boggling to me. And Clemson was able to do that on Amazon. The latest P3 instance has a petaflop of GPU processing. I mean, you really think like a single instance has the ability to process a petaflop on a single instance is mind-boggling. And their vision is to not pick a particular machine learning framework, but allow all of them to work flawlessly on AWS. Not specifically any individual framework, but all of them. That's an amazing goal, I think. So I got this from AWS Geek, but during Peter DeSantis' talk, he kind of talked about the move from using the move from using Zen to KVM. And with the new C5 instances, I'm sure that doesn't show up very well, but over the last couple of years, they've been moving to use this Nitro environment, and they've moved all of the virtualization, network storage, and monitoring off of the hosts to these well, I'll actually read my notes on it. The Nitro system was built to allocate all of the resources on the system to the EC2 instances instead of to the actual management part. So correct me if I'm wrong, he mentioned something along the lines of 99% of the host is able to go to customer instances now, instead of where if you would think if you're using something like VMware, you've got a couple of megabytes is going to that VMware hypervisor. They've set up Nitro to be so tiny and so exactly working the way that you want it to for being able to provide all of that resources to the user there. So it's quite interesting. They're doing it with Apertuna, an organization they bought, Apertuna Labs, I'm screwing it up. But they build custom ASICs, and those ASICs they're getting, they're building it for this Nitro system, and it allows them to move from the Zen system that they've had for years to the actual KVMs now, they're using KVM, which actually, what really I think is the best part of this whole thing is actually paved the way for Amazon this year to announce bare metal instances. So instead of spinning up the actual EC2 instances, you are able to now provision bare metal servers on Amazon's infrastructure to do whatever the heck you want to do there. So, but this is a horrible picture, but this is showing off the, Amazon has an internal service called Hyperplane, and that's what actually allows for the Amazon Elastic File Service, the AWS Managed NAT, the Network Load Balancer, and Private Link. All those new services are specifically put in place because of what Hyperplane provides to customers, or internal. And it really started with the S3 load balancer, that they've now gotten up to the ability to process at a given time 37 terabytes of data, is able to go across that hyperplane in any specific region. And like I said, it's paved the way for all those services there. And to actually see Hyperplane as a user, you would want to take a look at the network load balancer. So that's one of the new load balancers that was announced maybe a couple months ago. That's Hyperplane, but for Amazon customers. Briefly, Stephen Schmidt, the AWS CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, got up and talked about Amazon Guard Duty, which is a pretty interesting service that they announced. It allows you to do intelligent threat detection automatically. And a use case, I think, for this is he talked about how Amazon has a single security engineer on call at any given time for the entire, sorry, when I say Amazon, I mean AWS. AWS has a single security engineer on call at any given time, and they work in 6-hour shifts, and there's a backup on call, but they're rarely called. And Stephen Smith, he's actually on that rotation call, or maybe not on that rotation call, but he's in the escalation of if somebody weren't to answer on their shift, the backup would get called and their supervisor, but he's never gotten called, so obviously they're doing something right. And it's all because it's automated. And from what I understand, Amazon Guard Duty is their version of that, but for customers. So it's pretty interesting. I've taken a look at it for the company I work for, and it'll tell you whether or not your one of your instances is communicating with a botnet or any of those types of things that you would think you probably want to know from a network security perspective. It's all automated. It all uses the VPC flow logs and all that high-speed stuff that instead of setting that up for yourself, you use Guard Duty and it'll do it for you. So, day one keynote was pretty interesting. Andy Jassy, the CEO of AWS, that's the link there if you want to use it. And that's looking pretty crappy over the Chromecast, but bear with me. So, first couple of things, obviously the CEO of a company has to talk about is they have an $18 billion run rate, which, if you know what that means, I think it means you're making lots of money. And growth over year is 42%. So, from what I understand of that, every year they've essentially doubled, or not almost doubled, but they're 42% bigger than they were last year, and they have millions of active customers. And they consider an active customer anybody that's interacted with their infrastructure over the last month, I think. And so that means millions of users, millions of companies or customers are using Amazon every month.
Like 53 cents or counted.
Yeah. You know, I run an Amazon account for a little Veterans of Foreign Wars in Frederick, and they're only spending about $1 a month, but it's an active customer, so. You know. 3 new instance types. The newest is the P3, which I was talking about earlier. That's a petaflop of processing, and the H1, and they now have also announced T2 Unlimited, which allows you to specify the ability to, I guess, have unlimited bursting capabilities on your instance. Obviously, you pay for it, but you won't have. Anyways, ECS was announced a couple years ago. They have 100,000 active customers. So you know, you're thinking how many users are out there spinning up Docker containers. I have some more information on that later. But there's hundreds of thousands of active customers on ECS. They announced the EKS, the Elastic Container Service for Kubernetes. So if you weren't a fan of ECS, but you have used Kubernetes in the past, you will have very soon, it's in preview, I assume if you talk to the right person you can get on it, the ability to spin up essentially a managed service for Kubernetes. So you can automatically deploy multiple masters to different availability zones for high availability, and has full integration to all the AWS services. So I find that interesting. I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about they want to be able to have all of the different machine learning frameworks work on Amazon. Same thing as here. Instead of focusing on a particular framework for Docker or container management, they're providing multiple venues for that. And actually, I was surprised. I heard this was coming. I was like, hey, that's great, managed Kubernetes. And then they said, well, instead we're going to talk about AWS Fargate, which is serverless containers. So instead of actually needing to stand up servers, you can just push it off to AWS Fargate, and it'll manage the actual infrastructure for you. So that's kind of, from my perspective, it seems like pretty awesome, actually. You don't have to worry about spinning up instances. You can just push a button and have it go to Fargate, and the container will run as long as it needs to run, and Amazon will charge you for it. Talked a little bit about Lambda. Again, hundreds of thousands of active customers using Lambda. They announced Go support, so instead of using some sort of shim with JavaScript to run Go, you can actually use Go natively with Lambda. And they upped the memory limit to 3 gigabytes. So instead of 1.5 gigs, you're up to 3 gigs of RAM. You still only have a 5-minute runtime for Lambda, but if you're running something longer than 5 minutes, you should probably look at running it inside a container then, instead of Lambda. Just saying. This was super cool. Aurora was announced last year or the year before. They now have Aurora Multi-Master, which will, instead of worrying about how many read replicas you have in different availability zones to get your quick 100 millisecond or less than a millisecond response times, they have this ability now, or at least soon to have it, the ability to have multi-masters. So you have, instead of read replicas, you have actual reads and writes in every availability zone for your Aurora database. So you've got the ability to, you can kind of see it there. This is, the view of that's pretty crappy. I'm sorry about that, but you can see there he's got actually different availability zones, and all those actually say read writes in those different availability zones. Wish that wasn't so horrible. But what are you gonna do?
Is it completely different than Postgres or?
So Aurora provides
in terms
the
of
ability to do Postgres and MySQL.
Oh, it does?
It's pretty close. In fact, it's close enough that when I tested it for our Postgres stuff, it was flawless. It worked exactly like Postgres. I will swap over, thank you. Because the pictures that I got are actually much better looking than that. They don't look like I pulled them off of a recording. They actually look like I was actually there. Just saying. Let's hold on. Pardon the AV Club fun. There we go. Secondary display. Should be able to see this. Ha. Look at that. It's like I know what I'm doing. Look how pretty that is. Now I'm giving away slides. There we go. Let's see. Can I? We'll just put that. That's fine. So yeah, Aurora Multi-Master scales out your reads and writes to multiple availability zones and has 100 millisecond failover, which the way I kind of look at this is, Aurora gives you, well, it's an RDS, so it's a managed database service, but you're no longer having to worry about he likes to knock on Oracle.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to gouge you for money, but this stuff is pretty cool. And like I said, I tested it with some of our stuff that runs in Postgres. It's just the exact same ingest process into Aurora for Postgres. It worked perfectly fine. So the fact that they're doing multi-master now is just even better. Except for what's even better is Aurora Serverless, which instead of running Aurora in RDS, and it's always running. They now give you the ability to, or will soon give, yeah, actually it's in preview. It's on-demand auto-scaling serverless database. So if it's 2 a.m. and you've got Aurora serverless in your testing environment, you're not being charged for it. It's going to go away and come back in the morning, and you're not being charged while it's turned off. Whereas if you did that with RDS, you'd have to set up some sort of automation to turn that database off. I don't think you can actually turn it off. You have to terminate it and then stand it up for a while.
Well, how's it gonna be off? Like when, are you configuring it to be by time, or are you just not using an install?
So this is on demand. So it's an endpoint for Aurora that if your application is not interacting with the database, it's not responding to queries, meaning it's off and it's not charging you for it. And again, I will caveat all of this. I was there when they made these announcements. I don't know all of the details behind this, but from the idea of Aurora serverless, it would be some sort of endpoint that when you ask it for data, it gives you that information back. If you're not asking it for data, it's not charging you for the time. That's what I perceive as Aurora serverless.
You're probably not paying for compute, right? You're
Correct.
still paying for storage?
You would pay for
Yeah.
storage, yes. But you're
Hopefully
not-
data not going away, so
Right.
it's persistent, right?
It is
But-
available when you need it, and it's
Right.
not charging you for the
Lose
compute
those
side when it's not responding.
Right, is it just gonna work on schedule or on demand? It's just
it's on
like
demand.
warm-up time, like
It's-
with Lambda, whatever.
I don't
You wait
know
for
all the
whatever.
details. I would from the marketing material, and I've essentially copied the on-demand auto-scaling serverless database. When you ask it for data, it gives you the data. If you're not asking it for data, it's not going to charge you for that.
Probably similar to like Redshift Spectrum, where it charges you per query, something along those lines. I would imagine.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I included this here because I really think this piece of information here is mind-boggling. DynamoDB handled 3.3 trillion requests in the 30 hours around Prime Day of last year. So 3.3 trillion requests in 30 hours around Prime Day. And it peaked at 12.9 million requests a second. Like the amount of processing there is just mind-boggling to me that it can handle that. I'm sure it's a cost a pretty penny, but whew, if I had that many customers, I probably wouldn't be in Maryland. DynamoDB, global tables. From what I can understand about this is giving you a multi-master, multi-region database in the sense of you have your DynamoDB tables that are spread across regions. So if you have something that's interacting with a DynamoDB table in one region, it's getting the same data that a DynamoDB table in another region would actually be responding back with. So you've got that low latency response times without having to jump regions, and it's all in sync. DynamoDB backup and restore gives you on-demand backups and point-in-time restore up to the second, which was something that I thought was lacking with DynamoDB, so that's pretty sweet. This one, Amazon Neptune, fully managed graph database, supports Gremlin and Sparkle. I've never really got to play around with the graph database, but the fact that now if I want to, I can click a couple of buttons on Amazon and get one stood up for me and push data to it, says I'm going to be using some graph database in the future. This is another interesting tagline that Andy mentioned, modern companies. And so if you take a look back, we were talking about DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL database. They were talking about Aurora, which is an SQL database, and then Neptune, which is a graph database. Modern companies that use modern technologies are now going to use multiple types of databases across their company, but also multiple databases in a single application. So you've got a single application that will be talking to an SQL database for information, and then for a different part of that application talking to a graph database, all within the same application. Instead of having one part of the application, one application talking to this database, and then a completely different application trying to get that. It makes sense to me. I did a horrible job of translating what he said there, but it's kind of interesting, at least to me. S3 Select, I guess there was some issues with when you're trying to interact with S3, you would have to pull a lot of the data down to be able to figure out what you're actually looking at. With S3 Select, you're able to only pull out only the objects you need from S3 and gives you SQL query capabilities. That was for S3 Select. They actually gave you the exact same thing for Glacier Select, so you can run queries directly on the data stored in Glacier using S3 Select type things. SageMaker, this was talked about pretty heavily. It allows you to easily build machine learning models. I don't know all the details behind this. In fact, I haven't really gotten into the whole machine learning things yet, but I assume given all the stuff that has come out recently with machine learning, you kind of have to. And Amazon has now given you a service to figure that out for you automatically, or at least help you along the way to do machine learning. So you don't need to be you probably still need to be some sort of data scientist to be able to do some of that stuff, but they're just making it easier for you by having a service available. Amazon Deep Lens, or AWS Deep Lens, is a wireless deep learning enabled video camera for developers available on Amazon next year. If you take a minute and pull up the actual video for AWS Deep Lens, it's actually pretty interesting. He was able to, I think it was Dr. Matt Wood, the Vice President of Artificial Intelligence, gave a really interesting demo on Deep Lens where he had it processing real time his facial expression while looking at a album. And so, I think he showed Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon with a happy face, and it said that it not only caught that it was Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, but it was also that it was happy, that it was that. And then he showed Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up, and a frowny face, and it said not only caught that it was Rick Astley, but that he was not a fan of that album.
Is that only for a specific AWS camera that's going to be released with a chip?
That is it right there.
Yeah.
That is the
To buy
camera.
that in order to do that.
I don't know the dollar amount, so I would assume probably sub $200. $250? Okay. Hey, for what it actually has in there, I think you're gonna find that's probably pretty cheap. Amazon Recognition Video. I thought this was pretty interesting because if you've used Recognition, you can send a picture to it and it'll kind of tell you things about that picture. This is the exact same thing, but for real-time video, which if you really think about it is actually incredibly hard because a single picture is an A frame. Video is at the least, at least 24 frames per second. So being able to do the same thing that Recognition does for pictures, but for videos is just crazy. And to go along with Recognition, they announced Kinesis video streams. So it's a Kinesis ingest, but for video. So you get a Kinesis endpoint and you send video directly to that Kinesis endpoint, and you can tell it to do specific processing things, of which one is to send it to Recognition video. And then they started getting into the different natural language processing things that were now. So Amazon Transcribe is automatic speech recognition. If you've ever used Watson, it's supposedly a lot like that, so that's pretty awesome. Amazon Translate, automatic text translation between languages. I don't know the exact numbers on the different languages available, but assume it's over 20. More languages than I can speak. English and bad English is the two languages that I speak.
So like hot dog, not a hot dog.
Yeah. That's where Recognition Video and Deep Lens comes in, is to figure out whether or not it's a hot dog. Amazon Comprehend, fully managed natural language processing. Again, a nice jab, I think, at IBM Watson. Just to be able to have an endpoint that you send language to, or text to, and it'll tell you about that text. It's just amazing to me. AWS IoT One-Click. This is a service that Amazon provides, or is in preview now. One click will allow you for IoT devices to create, or for IoT services to create a one-click function, Lambda function that integrate with your IoT devices. So that's pretty cool. IoT device management, onboard and deploy IoT devices at scale. So if you've got millions of IoT devices that you're trying to bring online, you can manage it through IoT device management. Device Defender, as we all know, there's copious amounts of IoT devices out there constantly included in botnets, destroying our ability to surf the internet. So Amazon said, we'll create a service, and this is define and enforce security policies for IoT. So if you've got IoT devices on your network, put it behind or put Device Defender around it somehow, and it's coming in 2018, so look out for it. That'll be interesting. IoT analytics, as everybody needs to be able to take a look at all the different IoT devices on their network and what they're doing. This IoT analytics will clean and process and analyze IoT data automatically for you and then provide it so you can actually go through it and do things and understand things that are going on with your IoT devices. And this is actually, I think, probably, and this is the last thing he brought up, so this is a big thing. This is free RTOS, a IoT connected OS with the Amazon libraries pre-installed. So you'll have your IoT devices that you're bringing onto your network, and it's an operating system kind of like Amazon Linux that is already configured to work with the different Amazon services. So that's.
Is this the same thing as the Greengrass, but on the device? Because it was called Greengrass, but Greengrass wasn't on the device yet.
That I don't know. From what I understand with this is an OS that installs on IoT devices that comes with the Amazon libraries already set up to be able to talk to it.
But before reInvent, they were saying Greengrass was going to have a on-device, downloadable operating edge system compute environment.
That I don't know,
And that's what this sounds like.
potentially. Day 2 keynote with Werner Vogels, C2 of Amazon. He's, I just like him. He sounds like a cool guy. I've never met him. He just seems, he's just, the way he talks, how animated he gets during talks is just quite hilarious. So this year, it was a little different. He did a little bit of a different keynote this year. Normally he likes to do a lot of the different product announcements. This year he kind of went back over his first keynote, where 5 years ago he gave his 21st century architecture keynote. And this keynote was around providing an update to that, because obviously in the last 5 years things have been updated, so this is kind of updating the idea behind 21st century architecture. So the 4 commandments that he has there, they need to be controllable, easily split and pushed, resilient, have multiple availability zones, adaptive, be able to build first and ask questions later, and be data driven and use facts to drive forward. But you kind of think 3 and 4, you would think they're kind of at each other's odds there in 3 and 4, but if you think about it, you want to build it first, get it up and running, and then use the facts to figure out where you want to go from there. So it kind of makes sense to me, at least. In the last 5 years, they've apparently built almost 4,000 features and services. That's amazing to me. You've got something that big being built in the last 5 years, having 4,000 new things added to it. It just must be insane how hard it is to keep track of all that stuff. Let's see, what is going? Yeah. So from Werner's perspective, and I like the idea behind this, is what is going to set companies apart is the data you have, not the systems you have access to. So if you look at Amazon, you realize you guys have the exact same infrastructure a company like Netflix has. So you can spin up the exact same things Netflix has. You can provide exactly the same thing that a company that's making billions of dollars a year, you can provide that. And so the only thing that separates you from Netflix is the data that you have. So what he's saying here is it doesn't matter anymore what you actually have access to, and it's only the data that matters. So that's where you see a lot of these people are going towards machine learning, because when you have such copious amounts of data, you have to be able to process it. And, well, you can't process it anymore. It's too much data. You have to have a machine process it. So he started to go into the various different ways that interfaces kind of have progressed over the years, and it's not going to be like that anymore, at least in his perspective. They're going to be human driven. So there's not going to be a keyboard or screen or clicking on a phone trying to get it to do something. It's going to be voice. It's going to be vision. It's going to be touch in some way, and potentially maybe even smell is what's going to be really driving the way humans interact with these devices in the future. It's going to have this natural feeling to it instead of typing on a keyboard trying to get it to do what you want it to do. And then he talked about Alexa for like 2 hours after that. I'm just kidding. Mostly it was around Alexa voice service being able to integrate into anything with a microphone or speaker. So there was a lot of announcements around that, specifically Alexa for business. So instead of having Alexa in your house, you can now have Alexa for business. And there was actually a pretty interesting little demo where he was, I can't remember if it was a video or if he was just talking about it, but being able to tell the Cisco phone in the conference room to start the meeting. Well, actually, you're telling Alexa to start the meeting, which tells the Cisco phone to contact the meeting. I'm losing my words here. Your different meeting scheduling applications. It would automatically connect to it, dial in, start the meeting for you. Alexa would do that for you. Yeah. And briefly, he touched on something that I think I wanted to include this specifically because he said something that is very important to me. It's no longer a security person's job anymore to do security on a network. It is everybody's job. It's my job as an operations guy to make sure we're secure. It's you guys' job as developers to make sure things are secure. Because really the only way to do that is through automation. So you kind of talked again about guard duty, automating a lot of that process for you, and that the security of your customers is your number one priority now. If you really think about it, like all the different things that have been going on, if you're not taking everything you do from a security standpoint, you're screwing yourself. And then he announced AWS Cloud 9, which I've played around with this. This is actually kind of interesting to me. It's instead of installing an application on your laptop and making sure that your configuration matches your coworker's configuration for how you've got it, I think I'll probably twist a few feathers here by bringing up the tabs versus spaces rule, and how if you don't have your specific configuration set up to do 4 spaces, but it does tabs, you're going to make somebody angry. Cloud 9 kind of gets rid of all that. There's nothing to install. You just go to a browser and you've got your development environment, and it's got a built-in ability for you and me to be on the same page. There's a built-in chat function. There's if I highlight something, it shows up in my color on your screen, and it's kind of an interesting little thing. And it all runs on an EC2 instance that's smart enough to know if you don't interact with it, it shuts itself off and it doesn't cost you anything, which I thought was pretty awesome.
So it wasn't Cloud9 its own independent product, or did they roll this themselves? I thought Cloud9 was a...
You got
I
me.
think it Dome 9?
No, I thought it was...
Cloud
I think they bought them.
Yes.
Yeah,
Cloud9 was
right,
purchased.
okay, yeah.
Hi. Well, I thought they.
So you need to load an EC2 instance and then you... and then
It'll do it for you.
Okay, so and it's inexpensive and to just...
From what I saw, it was running on, I think, a T2 medium. And it gives you the option, and when you set up Cloud9, it'll give you the option to set essentially a timeout. So if you don't interact with that development environment for 30 minutes, it shuts the instance off. And then when you interact with that environment again, it turns the instance back on for you, which I thought was kind of awesome, actually. Because you're not being charged. It goes back to that whole on-demand serverless, well, even though it is server full. Just make that up. So some sessions I went to, pretty interesting little things out there. like I said earlier, there's thousands of different sessions that were available, and I only got to go to, I think, 6, of which the last 2 were after reInvent, so I wasn't quite awake for them. So I've only got pictures of 4 of them. I don't know where the other pictures went. I thought I took pictures, but maybe I was taking pictures like this. I don't remember. Sorry, I meant to. So this was using Amazon CloudWatch for Amazon ECS resource monitoring. So this was, Mapbox was given a talk, and this actually blew me away in the sense that Mapbox uses 31 custom metrics per ECS cluster. When I think about the company I work for is ECS cluster, I think we have 2 metrics, and they're the ones that comes with the ECS cluster. It's CPU and memory utilization. The fact that Mapbox has 31 different metrics per ECS cluster is just probably sets them way apart from us. And I think the big thing that I took away from, not only that it was 31 different metrics, but the fact that number's always changing and no one's afraid to put new metrics out there. So if they decide they want to look at something different, they add it, and it costs them a couple of pennies a month. No big deal. It's just one more metric to gather information from. I think this was my favorite talk, this deep dive on Amazon EBS. I thought I knew a lot about Amazon EBS until I saw this slide. And I think I took like 7 or 8 shots of this, and this is the best one. So I apologize to the guy in front of me that I got his head in there. He probably doesn't want to be broadcasted all over the internet, but hey, whatever. This slide is telling you all the different ways that you can think about the storage and how you want to access your storage and which EBS volume type to pick. The amount of information on that slide is just mind-boggling to me. Because I think I've only ever used GP2 and the dense storage over there. I've never, maybe a little bit of the provisioned IOPS storage, but this was new to me. SC1 was new to me. I'd never even thought of them before. But just looking at that, being able to give that decision matrix and say, okay, this is the type of storage I need to use is pretty interesting to me. Along with the C5 announcement, with the migration to KVM and the different ways that they're using the hosts there now, they actually have EBS being attached as a NVMe block device instead of as whatever it was before. The actual device itself is being shown as an NVMe device, which I thought was interesting because I've only recently heard of NVMe devices on a laptop I bought last year. So just the fact that we're virtualizing all the way down to NVMe block devices is interesting. I took this snapshot, and I'll actually show this again later. Amazon has a best practices URL down there for Ops Automator. It's a process for automated snapshots of volumes via Lambda, and a whole other slew of other things that you can actually automate via serverless infrastructure to assist you in doing operations tasks on your Amazon account. I never really had thought about using RAID on EBS, and when they started explaining why you wouldn't want to use, why RAID 1 is what you would want to use, it makes sense to me because you have a limit, I think it's 16 terabytes per EBS volume. I think that's is it 16 terabytes? There's a limit per EBS volume, and say you want to have over that limit, you would actually stand up additional EBS volumes for that instance, and then use a software RAID on the instance to actually meld them together in a RAID 0 configuration. And at RAID 0, when you think about it from the perspective of like traditional storage, if you're building something in your house and you set up RAID 0, you will probably lose data at some point in time. But by using EBS and having the way that EBS is built, you're essentially just doubling your storage capacity. So they kind of explained why you don't want to use RAID 1 when you're using EBS, and why RAID 6 and 5 and 6 would also not actually be beneficial to you. So just the fact that using RAID 0 on EBS to get more additional storage, I thought was really interesting. Serverless architecture patterns. This was actually a pretty good talk in the sense of I got to be super up close, so I'm sorry I'm not able to. I mean, I was like right there. I was like, wow. And this is a massive room with like 4,000 seats. So they went into explain a little bit about what parts of your Lambda code need to be positioned where, and where they need to be positioned. So you actually want to set up your AWS and your database clients outside of the scope of the handler in your Lambda functions for better performance. Because we all understand the difference between a cold start and a warm start. The cold start is starting up the entire Lambda function, whereas the warm starts are only just starting up the handler. So if you are setting up a communication to a database, you want to put that in your cold start section, or just the part that's not actually part of the warm startup. So it just gives you better performance. I did not know that. I did not realize that that's how that worked. And then they briefly touched on something I had never heard of before, but the serverless application model. It's an open spec for rules for expressing serverless applications on AWS. So there's, I didn't provide the link down, I didn't copy that link anywhere else, because if you Google serverless application model, you'll find it. So it's kind of interesting. It's just a specification around actually building proper serverless applications on AWS. And it actually comes with a SAM local, so you can actually test your Lambda, your serverless functions locally and deploy them to AWS, all with this serverless application model. And for the rest of that talk, they kind of went into serverless data lakes, which I've only kind of started to really think about pretty heavily, in the sense of when you really think about it, the term data lake, I think, is kind of like the term synergy, or maybe a couple years ago around the idea of everybody's moving to DevOps. It's just one of those words that somebody comes up with, and you're like, oh, that's a dumb word. What does that even mean? But really, a data lake is just, you just throw your data into an S3 bucket, and then you build a thing around it to be able to process that data, whatever it ends up being, however you want to process it. That's a data lake. I mean, the idea behind that. And so they kind of explained how with Amazon and S3, you don't really need to build these massive infrastructures to process this stuff anymore. They've done it for you. So you can catalog and search all of your data with AWS Glue and Elasticsearch. You can ingest it with all the various Kinesis streaming capabilities. There's obviously a lot of security and auditing built around it, of which next week we're going to talk about Macy over in Frederick. I'm super excited. The idea to be able to have a machine learning interface tell you what's in a bucket, whether or not it's got data that's going to hurt your customers. That's amazing, And then obviously all the analytics that are around being able to process all that data. It's all already built by Amazon. You just have to push some buttons or add some CloudFormation code to stand it up, and it's already done. I'm a Python guy, and so I apologize if anybody else doesn't care about this, but this was amazing to me. There is a Python library that works on Amazon Lambda that really shows the power of serverless in the information they've provided there. This Lambda Python library gives you 10 teraflops of compute with 1,000 concurrent functions, has the ability to do 60 gigabytes a second of read and 50 gigabytes a second of write to S3, all with a Python, stupid simple Python library. You're getting that amount of processing. That shows you not only the power of serverless to be able to provision just that amount of processing, but being able to do it with something like Python is just awesome, truthfully, at least to me. I don't care what you guys think about Python. It means a lot to me. Ops Automator shows up again. This is Amazon best practices. There's some documentation around it. I think there's even some CloudFormation templates there that you can just automatically apply to your Amazon infrastructure, and it gives you the ability to do all sorts of ops things automatically. So you don't have an ops person making sure that you're snapshotting different instances, it'll just do it for you on a schedule, which I thought was really interesting. Really didn't get into this all too much, but it was just a use case for serverless. Autodesk has a Tailor service because if you're doing an Amazon best practice of your organization has a different account for every different business use case, or every developer has their own AWS account, so there's no crosstalk and one developer overwrites a different developer system. You're going to have a lot of AWS accounts at your disposal, and Tailor gives you the ability, from Autodesk, gives you the ability to bring that AWS account into your existing groups and apply your business practice, your security rules around that account within about 10 minutes. Like it's all configured for you instead of, I guess they previously, when they would do this for a new account, it would take 10 hours to have that account set up properly. So it's not, causing any issues with any other, mostly around billing, I assume, or probably access rules and stuff like that. But it's giving them the ability to do that in 10 minutes instead of 10 hours, which it all goes back to the whole idea of if you automate it, then you don't have to worry about it. This was, I couldn't find a video for this. This was, I think this was the Bank of Australia. Talked about their different ways that they use containers, which I just thought was, when you really think about, having dealt with some of the customers that I've dealt with, the fact that I had a hard time trying to talk them into containers, because if you really think about it, we're just talking about government folks. They're kind of scared of containers still, and it's been a couple of years. They're still afraid of containers. You've got a bank in Australia that does absolutely nothing but deploy to different container environments. It's amazing to me. They said, okay, we'll use ECS, but we're also going to use Kubernetes. We're also going to use Mesos. We're also going to use all these other different environments, and they've got a CI/CD pipeline built around it to make sure it's all deploying properly. And what really blew me away was what they took it even a step further with CloudFormation to have their Jenkins pipeline. When a developer pushes a change to their environment, Jenkins is interacting with CloudFormation in such a way that that change plan that CloudFormation provides is actually now included with the pull request. So if you're reviewing a pull request, you're able to look at that CloudFormation change plan and say, these are the parts that are going to change, and then that's part of the decision of whether or not you're going to approve that pull request. I'd never even thought of that before. I knew that information was out there. I never thought about pulling it into a pull request. That's just awesome to me. Then another pretty awesome talk was the deep dive into container scheduling, which I guess this is actually a really good one, in the sense of the information that they were providing there. Hundreds of millions of containers each week are stood up by ECS. Not millions of containers, hundreds of millions each week they're standing up on ECS. That's just, again, the numbers behind Amazon is just mind-blowing to me. I have a hard time with like 50 or 60 containers a week. That's just mind-blowing. There are now, this is not the greatest picture over there, I'm sorry. Now 4 different schedulers. There's service scheduling, batch scheduling, event scheduling, and daemon processes. I've never used the last one, but the service one's pretty easy to set up. You stand up a ECS service and you put it behind a load balancer, and it's now processing data. It's super simple. They really went into talking about the task placement engine. There's a lot of default attributes that come with it. Big thing they were kind of pushing was your best bet is to build custom metrics, and that goes back to the Mapbox slide where there's 31 different metrics that they had for their ECS cluster. You can also apply custom attributes, so you've got those metrics that are specifying different parts of your system and how it's working. You can then use that information from CloudWatch to also build custom attributes on your ECS cluster to figure out how to properly place tasks on your environment. And this graphic here kind of explains how that task placement process works. So you have your cluster constraints to satisfy different CPU and memory and port requirements, and then once it gets past that, you reduce the number of instances available to the custom constraints. So if you want to filter based on location or instance type or a specific AMI, that's to be able to filter down even more, Then you have your different placement strategies, which I'll show here in a second. And then lastly, after you've gotten through all that, it actually applies the filter to the couple of instances that that particular task would fill into. Which, I mean, when you really think about it, I don't quite know all the details behind Kubernetes. I don't know if it has that level of fine granularity to be able to place tasks based on specific things, but the ability to do that with ECS is, I think, pretty interesting, because you can get into these different placement strategies, and I can't tell you the difference between bid, packing, and spread aside from what you see here. I mean, just the fact that you're able to decide that you want all of your tasks to be on a particular host for a particular reason. All those different strategies exist, and it's all automated. So you're not doing that work. ECS is doing it for you. And this is kind of explaining using a Amazon command line call to actually figure out how to do a different, based on some custom attributes on your ECS cluster, where to place those tasks in your different availability zones. And then you can even take it a step further and actually do it for multiple services, and multiple services doing different strategies on the same cluster. So it's not a particular, it's the same cluster, it's just a cluster of instances that are available to you. You have one service that acts in one particular way, a different service that acts in a different particular way on the same cluster. So they're acting differently, but they're being interacted with on the same instances. So it's kind of interesting. This is talking about having a custom metric that is set up a constraint and a custom attribute with a state of pre-drain, so you don't have tasks that get placed on an instance that just ends up getting torn away. I know I've run into that a couple of times where a task will get placed on an instance and then we don't need that instance anymore, so ECS has to do the work to actually move that task somewhere else. Instead of waiting for that to happen, you can set custom attributes to set it as a pre-drain and actually never actually put it on that host that's going to go away in an hour. Put it on a host that's going to be around for a good bit. But none of that matters anymore because of Fargate, so you don't have to worry about placement strategies or anything. If you just want to run it on Fargate, you can just push a couple of buttons and Fargate will put that in that container out there wherever. And you're no longer limited by the number of instances you have currently spun up. It's just go to Fargate, which, I really thought about that. I wonder if you could figure out a way that if you were already at your maximum perceived capacity, but you really needed additional instances, maybe Fargate would be that, because you can specify whether or not you want to spin up a task that's on normal ECS or on Fargate. And I assume you could have some sort of Lambda function built that would try to, maybe that's actually what they're saying there, is you just need that additional capacity. Instead of waiting for the instances to come online, you just send it to Fargate and it's over. This was how Netflix monitors applications in near real time with Amazon Kinesis. That was when I didn't take any pictures. And then security validation through continuous delivery at Verizon. This was actually a really good talk of a friend of mine that they built a, and I think Stephen, you were talking about it, was CFN NAG.
Yep.
From Stelligent. Verizon and Stelligent have built an API around CFN NAG, so you can build your CloudFormation templates, and it's not publicly available, but they built an API for it to where you can send your CloudFormation templates to this API. It would validate whether or not your CloudFormation template is valid. If it's not, it would fail the build, and then you wouldn't be able to deploy that CloudFormation template. Instead of having that API, you can use CFN NAG as part of your build process, and it'll fail or pass your build off of that, which is from a perspective of making sure your CloudFormation is secure. You can't go wrong. Replay is actually my favorite part. It was 5/10 this year, so the walk to replay was very long, and there was lots of people in front of me. They have I forget the name of it, but essentially you get in like these these puffed up balls, and you're like kicking a soccer ball around, but you're like slamming into each other. Way too active for me. They had a pool this year, which was pretty cool, and there's just tons and tons of people there. This was one of the tents, and this is like, it reminds me of like an airplane hangar, how big it was. Tons of cool lights in the pictures, or tons of cool lights and music. I'm looking at pictures, more pictures. Just tons and tons of people there. I didn't even see half of these people at the actual conference.
Well, they were all over, you had all those buildings, I mean, all the
Yeah,
resorts.
that's true. This was super fun. It's not a very good picture of it, but super fun to watch. I didn't actually do it because, again, way too much activity for me. But these people would run up this thing and then just cartwheel over to the other side. I don't know if they died on the other side or what. They just would run up it, and it was amazing.
Never see him again.
Yeah, and this is a little panorama of the whole thing. And it wasn't like all behind me. It was like from here to here. It's just 180-degree view of just in one of the little containers there. It was just amazing. It was pretty amazing. Okay, that was it. That's reInvent. Thanks.
Any kind of game that included the cloud to control the game?
Do what?
They didn't have any kind of game that can use the
Man.
cloud to control the game?
I thought I got around reInvent this year. I only got to like 3 casinos. I didn't get to see near. I mean, I did talked about maybe 6 sessions. There was 1,000 sessions there, 43,000 people. I mean, I just scratched the surface on this talk.
Yeah, I mean, then you had.
I could have bored you guys for an additional 4 hours. I'm just saying, there was way too much stuff going on. They had a section that I got to see briefly. It was so they have the expo area where there's just tons and tons of people trying to get you to use their service. And then they had a little, I forget the name of it. It was like a mini expo, but it was the Quad. It was called the Quad, college-related things that I failed out of. But they had JPL over there with little robots. They were showing off their little JPL robots. They had these little ball moving things that you controlled from your phone, and you can smash them into each other.
Oh, okay.
It was pretty crazy. There was a whole little IoT section. I mean, I could.
How many times did you have to Uber or walk over to the other
So
venues?
I lost count of how many miles I walked.
Oh, okay.
I know you were keeping track. You
I
had
walked 10.
You walked
One
10
day
miles
per
in one
day.
day. Yeah. My feet still hurt. It's been 2 weeks. I still got a blister on the back of my foot from walking so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
How do you get invited to one of these things? I assume you have to pay for it.
Well, so luckily, my company paid for me to go. It was part of my contract stipulation with them. I wouldn't go work for them unless they sent me to reInvent. But
Just
it's
once or continuously?
you what?
Just one time or continuously?
I got to double check that. Should I go back next
There you
year?
go.
It's, I forget the exact dollar amount. I think it's $15.99 for the full conference pass. So, I mean, it really kind of does come down to your company kind of has to pay for it.
Usually there's a early bird.
There is
kinda
also
sign.
early
It's
bird.
You can get $300.
Something like
maybe
that,
if
yeah.
you do it early enough.
Yeah.
And then they have all these workshops and stuff that are extra money. But all the sessions are free, just the hands-on stuff possible.
And where was it again?
Vegas.
Oh.
Small towns.
Small
Oh,
town.
I was wondering why you said casinos. Okay.
All
So you actually did go to the
It's all
casino.
in Vegas, yes.
What?
You actually did go to the casinos then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You definitely have to walk through the casino to get to the reInvent conference. It is specifically built that way, not by AWS, but by the casinos, because they want your money just as much as those people in the expo hall want your money.
Yeah, once you walk 20 minutes to get to the casino, and you have to walk
Yeah,
20 minutes through the casino.
That's the way they build. The ballrooms are in the back of the casinos.
Oh yeah, it's a hike. My former Army self was mad at me because I could do ruck marches for 30 miles and not have a problem. But now that I've got an additional 20 pounds on the front instead of on the back, walking all that was just a pain in the butt, man. It's a hike.
Bring your Segway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, okay, enough,
There was I think a lot of them were streamed live, right?
oh yeah, in fact, why don't I
So,
pull that
even if you
up?
couldn't make it to Vegas, maybe you could make it to a room with a TV.
You can go to YouTube.
Yeah. And then a lot of the sessions were up within a few days.
Yeah. Let's see if it loads. Wi-Fi's being a little hokey. We go.
Oh, yeah. It's in the documents.
What is it?
Well, did they have smaller forums where you could interact and ask questions? Because I mean, you just said one of your rooms was 4,000, so
Yeah,
where was all the
so they had,
interactive rooms you could ask questions to the engineers with?
Yeah, they definitely. So there was one of those that the one that I didn't post. Oh no, the Bank of Australia one is actually what's called a chalk talk, and I was actually surprised I got in because it only had 30 seats. So you're close up and personal with the guy from the Bank of Australia and an Amazon guy, and they for an hour just did nothing but answer questions and then put stuff on a whiteboard and explain minute detail about individual parts of the thing. Because with 30 people in the room, you've got time for that. Whereas
Right.
the other one was just up on a stage talking, because there's no way you can answer 4,000 people's questions. Or I don't know if 4,000 people in a room, but it was a 4,000 room hall, so 4,000 seat hall. It was probably 3/4 of the way full, so probably 3,000 people in that room specifically.
Also, with the various account teams are there, working with some, customer sets, and you can get EDC-like setups, or go meet a product team, talk to that product team. So you can just get those scheduled. There's also partner events, if you're a partner of AWS, there's a little bit more secluded, I guess, in a way, right? So,
Some of the breakouts had time for questions. There was also workshops, which was even smaller than the breakouts, so you could ask questions. So the keynotes are huge, and then it goes down.
Even on the expo hall, like Amazon had a whole section where it's just like ask an expert, and you could just go up and talk about whatever.
yeah, so if you're planning to go and you have access to an AWS account team, it'd be a pretty good idea to reach out to them and let them know, and maybe work on an agenda with them, especially if you wanted to talk to a product team, they can help set that up. Or if you are a partner, you work through your AWS account team, maybe they can get you to some various partner workshops and such.
Yeah, having an agenda would be nice. It's like so spread out. It was so hard. The app was kind of terrible to schedule through. It was hard to find where you wanted to go. So a lot of planning would have helped.
Did you delete the app after you were done with it?
Yeah, the app's done. Yeah.
You deleted it?
Yeah.
Okay. Just looking at down
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely go out to the YouTube for Amazon Web Services because you can see. I think if we
It should be a playlist for reInvent.
I mean, you can.
Do you have Slack up?
What?
Do you have Slack up? I send you a link.
I closed it because I didn't want you guys to bother me.
So somebody went through and made an entire, I posted on the Columbia Meetup site, but somebody went through and made an entire list for each session to each individual YouTube link. So it's massive.
Yeah. I mean, that's just some of them right there.
I'm surprised they don't just point to it off the Amazon Web Services for.
They probably do on. Hey, look, there you go. Next year, November 26th to the 30th.
I'm sure they're collecting money already.
I don't sure they sold.
thousands of tickets already.
Yeah, you can't buy tickets yet. You can only add it to your calendar.
Yeah. So yeah.
So it's that is one of the two channels on YouTube that Amazon Web Services has. The other one is AWS webinars. So if you go there, you can get all sorts of cool stuff.
Did they say more whether they're bringing some more hackathons to this area? Last year or so, they had the zombie hackathon and some other ones, and they called them Lost or whatever.
I didn't hear anything about that. I wouldn't be surprised. At least I know in Frederick, we're hoping to get a meetup hackathon going
Oh,
on this
okay.
year. So obviously, I'd love to interact with AWS in some way to get something like that going. Just because it's fun. That's some cool stuff.
They did a bunch of stuff on Switch too. I guess Amazon made it on Switch now.
Twitch.
On Twitch, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Amazon does a Twitch. Yes,
Like
there's
live
a,
coding.
yes, yes, you can do that. I watched one. That's cool. Nerd, yeah. I watched it on Cloud.
I have a question though, with the like P3 instances, is it profitable to mine Bitcoin?
Still is not well, let me take that back, because now that Bitcoin is up to like $100 billion. Probably is now.
What's the latest? It fell pretty hard, right?
It's like 16 and a half, I think.
Yeah.
The tool market.
It did hit 2,000 and it dropped.
16,941.
16,990.
I thought it was even lower, it must have gone back up there.
That's what you need to put point of entry to buy 1 Bitcoin?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's one Bitcoin.
Litecoin is now going nuts.
It might be.
It's been going down.
Yeah.
So,
Bitcoin's been going down,
Can't
yeah.
afford that this
who's
year.
got an
little
Amazon
bit.
account? Let's test out these.
I bought a bunch before, so.
I know somebody just bought it the other day at like 90. Oh my god. Just the year. Gouged my
Yeah,
eyes out.
a couple nights ago it was like
It's
$3.70.
$8 when I was like, no, that's
Oh,
$8.
$8.
Have you been to AWS Summit? Can you compare the two of them?
Yeah, so the public sector summit here in DC,
The one up in New York that they had a couple months ago, it seems like a lot of the same kind of content.
it is. So I've only been to the public sector summit here. It's kind of the same. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of things going on. The scale is just immensely smaller. Mostly because I'm not quite sure like the size like the DC Convention Center, but it just seemed like the Sands Expo Hall in Las Vegas and the ARIA Conference Center, they're just bigger than any other conference facility I've ever seen. So the DC Public Sector Summit can only house like 5,000 people, whereas this thing had 43,000 because it's across 6 casinos. So it's just, I mean, obviously Amazon knows how to do scale, although they do it through CVent, so.
So the summits are similar to reInvent, like you say, but they're like 2 days, maybe, or 3 days at most. And also they are lots of different places geographically around the world. And the one here in DC is, like you said, it's the public sector, so it's more focused on like federal government, state, local governments, education. So some of the breakout sessions are more wrapped around that. Like the speakers won't necessarily be Netflix. It might be Carnegie Mellon, right, or something like that. And then I think the one up in New York I didn't go to it, but I assume it's probably more fintech focused.
We went this year, it was the Jacob Javits Center, so
Yeah.
it was pretty big.
Yeah,
So
but I'm
it
sure the
seemed
breakout
like a lot of the
sessions.
same, yeah, like there's workshops, there's
Sure.
hands-on,
Yep.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
So it sounds like it's probably just, all jammed into a day, so they gotta like chop it down as far as the skill.
Yeah, and like I said, I think when they go to the different regions or the different locations, they're probably a little bit more focused on the local thought processes, right? So in DC, it's definitely more federal government type. Up in New York, I think it's going to be a little bit more financial, tech focused. The one out in San Francisco is probably more startup, right?
I suspect reInvent is also a little more forward-looking.
There are announcements that come from summits, though. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
If you watch the summits that come out, there will be announcements. Yes, but at reInvent there'll be more announcements and maybe some bigger announcements. But even at summits, you'll see things like instance types being announced, or things of that nature.
Yeah, but more talk about
Yeah.
what is currently available, unless like what's coming soon in the breakout sessions.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was cost effective just because it was free, they paid for your lunch, and it was like, less than $200 up and back on the train. So
Oh, sure.
if you're concerned about, like, you can't get somebody ponying up $1,600 plus airfare plus hotel.
Right. Well,
It's a good day.
depending on where you live, I think DC might even be closer.
True.
So from that perspective for reInvent, the way that I make the joke about it being in my contract as a stipulation that I'll go to reInvent. Really, it's the amount of information that going to 6 sessions and being in that environment for a couple of days, the amount of knowledge that you just suck up accidentally is completely, in my opinion, completely worth it for a company to invest that. You know, we only sent 4 folks. I was hoping we'd send the entire team, just because of the amount of information. Getting some of our UI folks who just know about their code is deployed to an S3 bucket, you know, getting them to understand why it's in an S3 bucket and fronted by CloudFront, like why that's the case, just makes them better UI people. You know, it's worth it. And I don't even work for Amazon. I'm a fanboy.
reInvent also has, as opposed to the summits, has more like hackathon type
Yeah,
stuff.
Yeah.
And all this
Yeah.
kind of boot campy things. But again, those cost extra money.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes.
That's it. Unless you got more questions.
One quick question.
Yeah.
If you were to spin up all of the full capacity of that thing with a pie or anything, like how much is that gonna cost for like a minute?
I don't know.
A lot of money.
Who knows?
Well, it's serverless, right?
I mean, you got me.
Okay.
I do know that we at the company I work for, we've been using Lambda for various things, and we do a couple 100,000 invocations a month, and I think our
feature.
Lambda bill is like $3 or $4. So it's,
Personally, they're free.
I don't know how you guys are making money off
Bad
of
pricing.
Lambda. It is amazing. I don't get it. I don't know why you're not charging more for it, but thank you. Yeah. Just saying, it's amazing. I don't get it. We do have hundreds of thousands of invocations a month, and our bill is like $3 or $4 for Lambda. I don't get it. So I assume for that Pyron, I think that's what it's called. Try it out. Let me know. On your account.
Put a limit on my account
Yeah.
first, right?
Yeah. Start it at like 100, and then turn it up to 11, and let me know. Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.